Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in your business. Oh boy, do we have a treat in store for you today. This is our 100th episode. It seems like we just started doing this, and here we are at 100 episodes, packed with great content and actionable things you can do to maximize the value of your own business. Now, if you're an avid listener, you already know that the last question I ask in every podcast is, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years? It's a fun question, and frankly, we've had some really interesting answers. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're new to our podcast, every one of our guests have given some great expert advice on building business value, but this question allows them to get a little vulnerable and self-deprecating. And I thought this was a great way to celebrate our 100th episode. So here it is, a compilation of the answers to what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years. I hope you enjoy it as much as we have while producing this fun episode.
And it's kind of sad. It's kind of embarrassing for a guy who's a career HR guy to say this, but sometimes my maybe being a little bit too extroverted, and maybe saying things that were not as politically correct as they should have been. And when then somebody uses it against me and they say, you know, Mark, but you're the HR guy, and I'll kind of reflect on what I've said. I'm like, yeah. And that was really, and a few times they have been so politically incorrect that I have to apologize to an individual who I might have offended, which I had no intent to offend, but maybe that maybe got the best of me.
Well, I was thinking about that. You did give me a cue that you might ask that, and I didn't have an answer, but I thought about it, not because there weren't, it was which one? And I think the answer is impatience. I tend to feel like I have an answer and I know the path, and if others aren't already on the path and aren't seeing it, that I'm ready to get to the bottom line too quickly. And so from a spiritual perspective, I know there's a saying that God gave us 2 ears and on 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we talk. And so I've really tried to help manage my lack of patience and be more patient and be a better listener and not jump to the conclusion or too quickly.
Wow. It's that filter thing, right? It's I tend to tell it like I see it, and maybe sometimes I should sugarcoat it just a little bit more. But I think business owners like the straight talk, so that would be it.
I'd like to find out what can keep me out of trouble, but I would say in this business, the issue of wanting to be perhaps too helpful sometimes. We get calls from people who, their business is really struggling. They really don't have a whole lot to sell, frankly, and yet we want to help them. So we'll take it on. It's a deal that's not going to pay a lot of money. The small deals can sometimes eat your lunch. Well, they usually eat your lunch time-wise. But you like the person, you have empathy for their situation, and you say, you know what, as long as we're realistic on what we're dealing with, let's work it. And the upside to that is you do feel good if you have success. So that's the plus, but it can be a time.
It can be a real time suck, right? I mean,
just one.
Sorry, you can't
Wow.
give me 5. Look,
Wow.
I learned that because when I asked my wife, how would I answer that question? She's still talking, and I asked her 2 weeks ago, right? So
Yeah, you already left the room. She's still telling you.
right.
I think the thing that gets me in the worst trouble is that I'm really independent and have this tendency to just move forward and take action and go a little bit rogue on things. And that is not always in everyone's best interests, as I have been reminded throughout my life. So I always need checks and balances, either on a personal or a professional level, to rein me in and make me take a step back and say, okay, what's the process here? What needs to be done so that I don't get into trouble?
Oh gosh, that's hard. I can be direct. And so I've had to learn. I mean, I'm much, much better today. And they always say, why do you teach what you teach? Because you got to learn it yourself, kind of thing. I'm way better than what I was, especially that 25-year-old general manager. I was terrible. I did not get people. I was driven to get an end result. I did not factor in the human spirits, and i.e. why I'm so motivated to get this work out, because I know what works and what doesn't work. That one's got me in trouble. Not so much today, but it certainly did in my past.
Oh, Tom Bronson. So I spent my career, Tom, in sales and what's now called business development. And so there was an illusion that I held for too damn long. And that was that sales made the business work, right? Without customers, we're nothing. Now, there's some fundamental truth in that. But if you look at a company and say sales is strong, but operations or finance is weak, what happens to the ultimate value of that company, right? I would suggest they certainly will not thrive. They certainly won't get the multiple when they get to whatever their ultimate event turns out to be. And in the same way, if sales is weak and operations and finance are strong, you've got a great company looking for something to do. So it takes all three. But I used to believe that sales was perhaps even more important than it really is.
I'm gonna spin that just a little bit and say what personality trait that has been most successful for me recently, and it's only been recently, and I say recently over the past 5 or 8 years, is being okay with mediocrity. Being okay with mediocrity doesn't mean you're settling for just okay. It means that you have to let people learn on themselves, on their own. Delegating and being okay with mediocrity, because not everything's going to be done like I'm going to do it. It's not going to be done perfectly. It doesn't mean you put out a bad product, or you send out a bad message, or you go ugly early. It just means that people need to learn on their own. And I hadn't let people learn on their own. I had to be micromanaging. But as soon as I took a micro mentorship thought process into being okay with mediocrity until they define their own perfect, then it become much, much more successful, and quite frankly, a better quality of life as well.
Yes, I'm pretty spontaneous. I'm pretty creative and spontaneous.
Really?
Yeah. And so, that can get you in trouble, because sometimes you make a quick decision and then you're like, you know what? Maybe I should have done that. I've got it. When my son turned 16 years old, I thought, what would be a fun thing to do? Let's go have a candy dash. And so we took him to 7-Eleven and said, you have 16 seconds to grab as much candy as you want. And so you would be surprised. He's just grabbing handfuls. 16 seconds later, $106 in candy.
$106, and of course, $106. Look, I love 7-Eleven, a local convenience store based here in North Texas.
Yes.
But you're not probably paying the least amount of money.
No. Now, that was not a great choice. It was just close to the house. And so I thought, well, let's just try this. I'm standing up there and I'm like, are we really going to pay $106 for all this? But I already told him we would. So it's something, but it was so much fun. It created a memory for him that I'll never forget. So it was well worth the $106.
My tenacity. I am like a dog with a bone. I won't give it up. And I got to tell you, Tom, that has helped me a lot in my career, but it's also got me in lots of trouble with people because they just want me to go away. I'm just very tenacious.
In the theme of opposites attract, I'm a huge dreamer, right? So my big one is, it's tough being a visionary, waiting for the rest of the world to catch up with me. And so again, that's got me in trouble, but it's also been a benefit over time. And so that's why Charlene and I and others in our firm work really well together, because we complement each other.
Yeah.
And we really can quickly represent kind of all different components of a corporate need or a client need.
Man, yeah, definitely. I'm silly. I like to laugh. I'm playful. And some people, I don't know, I've been scolded definitely for maybe making a joke when people thought it wasn't the best time, or when there are children around for riling up the children. But I do think that it's actually a benefit, because I think for most people it can help them to be more comfortable, because with my job, I deal with really serious issues, some really dark stuff. And I think that if you can't use humor and silliness, then I think I'd go crazy. So I do get in trouble for that, but I think it's actually a strength.
Oh, easily. No tact.
No tact?
No tact. Yeah, I think I might be socially dyslexic.
That's awesome.
So when I was a kid, I would go to like cotillion, and all kinds of etiquette schools my parents would send me to. And that was the number one thing that I got in trouble for, was I don't have any tact. Fortunately, I'm a consultant now, so it's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, boy. Well, I'm far too outspoken. So, and I always tell people, if you ask me for my opinion, I'm sure to give it. So,
yes.
But that can result in problems.
Awesome.
I'm tempted to ask you to answer the question first, but
well, I have an answer. So go, but you give me yours, and I'll tell it.
I'll be curious to hear yours. I have to reluctantly confess, I break the rules.
Oh, you break the rules, and that gets you into trouble?
I do. I break the rules. And Frank, I often like to think I use it to my advantage, but I've often been accused of breaking too many rules. So,
well, I first would say my charming personality, but we won't go down that route. Probably the personality.
I would agree, by the way, that your charm may have gotten you in trouble through the years.
I would probably say that I'm not good at playing politics in an organization. I'm all about executing and results. So I don't like to play a game and give people answers they want or sound bits that they want to hear. I want to make sure that things are correct and we're executing, they're getting the results they want, and we're not stringing people along and giving them information that's not necessarily right, There's so many places you get into and people don't want to report results.
Right.
And they only want to report good results. They don't want to report results. And sometimes the news isn't good. And so it's a lot better to give the news and say, here's what's happening, and here's what we got to go do to fix this, and here's what caused it, than to say, I'll put this back, and I probably can fix that next month or something. So I'm very much here it is, and you might not like it, but it's real.
I was going to say my rugged good looks, but obviously that would make people laugh out loud. So honestly, it's the passion. Like you can see I'm really passionate about these subjects. I'm really passionate about development, but I do have to watch myself that sometimes when I'm communicating with people, they can feel steamrolled, right? They can feel like, well, he's clearly concluded already, like he's not open to any sort of a discussion, when I actually am, but I'm presenting so much like I am totally committed and I found out the answer. And so I realize sometimes, I guess all the time, I have to slow down and bring people with me, right? So like you and I have talked about recurring revenue, right? That's a lot of what we speak about at these conferences. So if we just go and say to people, you got to do recurring revenue, but if we're able to talk to them about their business and their business struggles and how recurring revenue has helped them, where they could go get more, then they could be convinced of it as well, as opposed to just shouting and pointing at them. And again, not that I do it in an angry way, but I'm just super passionate about it. I just have to make sure. And in fact, I tell people up front, like, you might feel like I'm being steamrolled, and I don't mean to do that. So even as much passion as I speak with, as long as I speak, I'm open to your ideas. I'm going to try to control that better. If you see me a way that I can do better, slow me down. But I actually have notes up on my bulletin board over here, and it says, don't talk so fast and don't talk so long, because oftentimes that's where the passion comes out. So I remind myself to keep that in check.
I am a eternal optimist. I mean, I literally I love serving people. I love helping, business owners and helping individuals, be successful, right? Or take that next step in success. And so with that, I guess that the trait that's gotten me into most trouble is, I'll overcommit myself, right? I will, it's like I did, because I just see the potential in the business, potential in the individual, potential in, what can be done. And I don't like to say no. I like to say, let's roll up the sleeves, lock arms, and get it done, right? And so that sometimes gets me in trouble at our firm. It's like, we've got another one. We got another opportunity. It's like, well, yes, we are. We're going to bring another someone else in. We're going to do, whatever. But, so it's just that eternal optimist. And as a career sales leader, you have to be that, right? It's,
well, let's see. My wife would tell you one thing. I would tell you another thing, right?
Well, my wife would give a list. She said, I can't do one thing, right?
One? I'm limited to one. I'll tell you, I sabotage myself sometimes with my mover life language, because my mover life language wants to get down the road so far, change, innovate, do all these things. But then all I see behind me is a cloud of dust. There's nobody following because they can't find me because I've gone too far without making sure the team is with me. That's gotten me in more trouble than I care to admit.
Well, it's funny, Tom, when you asked that question, I started thinking back to all my old performance reviews. And one of the things that communication IQ, we help folks understand, here are the strengths they have, but also the things to work on. And sure enough, what my boss would consider a strength, it was very easy for him to pick out the challenging things. So I'm a shaper, and by nature would like to work on strategy and large picture planning. The challenge, though, is when a shaper is under distress, you see the challenge come out of, all right, these guys don't get the plan, they're not moving fast enough, I'll just take it over. And so Gerald's been really kind and taught me a little bit about how I'm wired as a shaper. And he says, when you start to see this idea that you're frustrated and you're just going to grab the plan and take over, that's a sign that things are off track. And sure enough, as I looked back through old performance reviews, I took on a lot of extra projects when I was in that stressed mode. So that one still is something I can continue to work on.
And I'm not asking Pam, I'm asking you.
She'd have a longer list than you. So rugged good looks is not a personality trait, right? So, no, I think I think that I think it's probably I'm not afraid to be the dissenter in a group. So it kind of circles around brutal honesty and internal dialogue, maybe coming out when you might want to not. But, you know, I think that's what I'm paid for. And the people that call me back, that's why they call me back. You know, they want to hear it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's always some of each, right? If you don't want to hear it all, you know, then you're not going to maximize your business value, right? So
yes,
but I think that gets me in trouble sometimes too. Yeah, would that been on your list? I know it would have.
Well, I knew sarcasm was going to be in there somewhere. So the way I've categorized this as sarcastically brutal honesty.
There you go.
What?
Being a smartass. I'm kind of sarcastic and playful, and if I'm not making fun of you, I don't like you. If I'm making fun of you, I like you. And it was kind of funny when I was 23 years old. I went on a business call with a guy who was 70. And before I even got back to the office, he had called my boss and said, "What are you doing sending that snot-nosed kid down here to talk to me?" And I was like, wait a minute, I thought it went well. I thought it was a great meeting. And my boss said, well, you know, sometimes you can be a bit of a smartass. And I was really hurt by that. And I went home and I told Jan, because we were already married. I got married young. And I told Jan, she goes, well, you know, you can be kind of a smartass at times.
Well, it's certainly the one I alluded to, which is you're never as smart as you think you are. And, you know, my family, my parents, certainly my ex-wife will tell you that, not my current wife, because I'm a changed man, but we'll tell you that, you know, being a stubborn, condescending know-it-all is not an attractive quality. And you know, you as you go through life, and you get to be, you know, you're the same size fish, but the pond gets bigger. You better learn modesty. You better learn humility. You can't learn anything until you admit that you don't know something. And so humility is an essential quality to being a lifelong learner. And I am a strong believer in lifelong learning in every area. And so I am, I still fall into, you know, being competitive, wanting to be, you know, the smart aleck, you know, wanting to have the quickest wit and the best comeback. And, but, you know, I really try to be as humble as I can. And that doesn't mean, you know, being shamefaced and saying you don't know anything. You know, that's an extreme that, you know, you have to have confidence, you have to be secure, but you got to be humble. And you know, that's an area where I think it's probably a common affliction for lawyers. And I try on a daily basis to rein that part of me in.
Okay, and I'm probably going to sidestep it a little bit, but I'd say being the thing that comes to mind is being kind of an analytical person. So I'm on that side. I'm a quantitative guy. I like numbers. I like analyzing things. You know, I think I probably tend to overthink things in my life. And while that maybe hasn't got me into trouble, I'm sure that it's slowed me down in the past. The tendency to try and know exactly what's going to happen if I take this path versus that path, and think it all through, maybe means I miss the exit every once in a while, right? And I feel like, you know, it's frankly one of the things that really impresses me when I meet other people, that ability to make decisions, to live with them, to go through and not worry about what's going to happen and what the world is thinking. I think that's a great character trait. It's something I see in my kids, which they certainly get from my wife and not from me. I'm always really impressed with our kids' willingness to get out there, get in front of people, try something new, and not get totally frozen by worrying about and overanalyzing. So I'm getting better at that and trying to get better at that in my personal life. So we'll see. I'm still a work in process.
I would say being a risk taker. I tend to be a person who's a little bit free with taking risks. And sometimes I tend to be, you know how the ready, aim, fire? I tend to fire, and then I do it the opposite way. and sometimes I've gotten myself into trouble. So, yeah, I sometimes it's better to just take the action and then just deal with whatever you deal with. But yeah, and sometimes I'm a fairly high achiever too, Tom, and so sometimes I work too much, and so I have to. I'm doing a little better with that in my life now, but that's been an issue.
Personality trait got me into trouble. I would say for me that the desire to always be right. As an owner, you have to be able to listen, you have to be able to interact and talk. Just have this, I'll do whatever research, I'll stay up late. There's been times where I've worked, 48 hours straight, those kinds of things, just to be able to get to, to the right answer. And I think that while that's a laudable skill, and the wanting to be right is a great thing. I think sometimes that gets me in trouble by pointing out that someone's wrong when it really isn't even necessary, or calling someone to the floor for something when it might damage the relationship or whatever. But I think I've always been challenged by always wanting to think I'm right, and being willing to commit my every fiber of my physical and mental being to go out to try and make sure that I'm right, sometimes works against me.
I think outside the box, or some people might call me a kook. I believe into conspiracies and all that. So I am not afraid of thinking outside the box. And, and evidence of that is like my YouTube channel. Nobody in my business would ever think about creating a YouTube channel with a 10-foot pole. But I did it because I think people needed education. Most people in my business want to go for the big fish, for the private equity, for the venture capital. I have worked for those people. I have worked with people who make $10 million a year. Now I'm going for the little guys. Now I'm going for the businessmen whose revenue is less than $5 million, because there are so many of them.
Right.
Oh man, it's what my father would call my recalcitrant nature. Which again, my father's an electromagnetic compatibility engineer. So these are the words he would use when I was a child. You're so recalcitrant. It's like a fancy word for stubborn. Okay, got it. But I think that has been really useful, because I tend to be the rebel without a cause. I tend to be disruptive, like I said in grade school, challenge anything that was spoon-fed to me. I always wanted to know why, explain this, justify, because if you can't make this make sense to me, I'm not receiving or accepting it. And so I think that constant bucking the system, daring to be wrong, daring to challenge them to be wrong, and especially to challenge myself to be wrong, which was the hardest part. I had to eat a lot of crow, and I am all the better for it.
Thanks, Tom. I guess it's my turn now to get uncomfortable and uncover some of my blind spots.
I want you to face your fear, Jill.
Well, I think most of my loved ones, and I would agree that I have a fairly strong will that can come off as stubborn from time to time. And I could think of a story, a childhood story, if we've got a couple of minutes. If you want to hear
sure.
It, kind of demonstrates stubbornness. It's about a cat named Spaghetti. So
I can't wait.
When I was young, I still love all animals. And when I was young, we lived in the country and often had stray animals visit the door. And one time this cat came up, and my mom told me not to feed it. I had some spaghetti that I was eating, and I threw it outside for the cat, and she ate it. So that's how she got her name, Spaghetti. And of course, she kept coming back for more. And my mom kept telling me not to feed the cat. But whenever she left the room, I would sneak her whatever it was that I was eating or head out, and continued to get in trouble for it, but did it anyway. And then one day, my mom and dad were both gone, and my sister was in her room, probably making a mixtape, and Spaghetti came to the door. So I opened the door and snatched up that cat and brought her into my room, kept her there overnight, woke up the next morning to spaghetti and 6 kittens. So I was freaking out. Like, what do I do now? I have to tell my mom that I have a cat and 6 kittens in my bedroom, and she's going to be really upset. So I told her. She was upset. And the consequence was that I had to now take care of these cats and kittens and figure out how to find them new homes whenever they were old enough to do so. So it was, if I wasn't so stubborn, I probably wouldn't have been in the situation. But then again, I probably wouldn't have saved all these cats and kittens' lives. So on the flip side of that, I'm pretty persistent and I make an excellent accountability partner.
I would say most trouble, I'd like to keep myself entertained. And sometimes that involves with family and friends stirring the pot a little bit and being a bit of a practical joker and just sort of sitting back and watching what happens after I feel the need to entertain myself. So I would say that's the one that's probably got me in the most trouble. I would say the one that has served me the best over time, not to necessarily force an expansion of your question, but the one that has served me the best over time, I sincerely think I got from my mother, who was a first grade teacher for a long time, and it's empathy. It's the ability to put myself in another person's shoes, whether it's a business owner or a potential client or an employee of the business, and be able to operate from different perspectives and make sure that I create the best possible outcomes I can create.
Oh, this is a fun one. Trust. When I started, I did not really understand that you couldn't trust people. I was naive. I didn't know. I hadn't been around people that didn't tell the truth, or so I thought. And so I was so trusting. And yet, once I figured that out, how, people can be, it's actually both. It's the thing that's caused me the most heartache, but it's also the thing that trusting has probably made me the most money.
Oh, I like
so
that.
It's been a double-edged sword, understanding how it works.
I thought about that, and I would have to say probably persistence. Now, persistence can be good, or it can be interpreted sometimes as not so good. I think I had mentioned earlier that earlier in my career, I was one of the founding members of a software company, and I served as the senior VP of sales and built the company around the software that we had. And I had a customer that signed a deal with us. I think the deal was about $19 million, if I remember right. It was a huge deal for us at the time. And he called the chairman of our board after I had signed the deal with him, and he was a client. He called and he said, he said, one of the reasons that I signed this and bought this software is that I don't ever want to hear from Jimmy Curtin again. He said he is the most persistent SOB I have ever met in my life. Well, our chairman, Britt, asked the client, well, did you buy it and not want it? He said, oh, no, it's the greatest thing we're probably ever going to do. He said, but I just don't want him calling me anymore. So that can work both ways, right? I mean, but I would say persistence is important, but just know when to let off the throttle.
Well, I think I just think trouble with my wife. Just honestly, it's lack of open-mindedness around certain things, whether that was a big sticking point in a relationship for a long time was I just had this need to everything I ate had to be organic, kind of thing. And it's just really unnecessary. So stuff like that is just being stubborn and not open-minded about certain stuff. It's I might sound like I'm super open-minded on this interview, but dude, I'm just like anyone else, so that's what's got me in the most trouble.
Oh man, I am so strong-willed. I know every probably business owner is yes, me too. I mean, that's why we're in the position that we're in. I know you're looking at my face. If you can see my face, I look young enough, but I am not a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, right? And I used to change jobs every year and a half, 2 years. And I thought something was wrong with me. I'm like, why do I get agitated, bored? I want to leave. I feel like I'm not doing it. I always was moving when it wasn't acceptable to move. And then when I started this business, I finally got it. I don't like to listen to anybody. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. So this is the longest role I've ever been in, is this business. We're in our 4th year. And honestly, that's what's gotten me into trouble, because I would leave jobs because I didn't like how things were being done, or I didn't agree with it, or I had a moral issue and I couldn't overlook it. So that's it. That's what's gotten me in the most trouble, is that Leilani does not like to listen. My parents, if I'll have them listen to us, they will be laughing right now. They'll be like, yes, she has been that way since she was born.
I love that question. I tend to react very quickly, and often too quickly. And people will say, wow, that's actually really great. That actually sounds so positive. Well, it can be a positive, and in a crisis situation, it actually is very, very helpful. I think Elon Musk is very well quoted to say, look, just make a decision. Even if it's a bad decision, just make a decision, because you're moving the ball forward. But sometimes in the aftermath of making a quick decision, you realize that, what, if I just slept on that, not every decision needs to be made within a millisecond. And I have really taken that to heart over my career. And and probably as I've become more mature in my thinking, where instead of responding right away, I will now let me just answer that tomorrow. Let me sleep on that. And that has really saved me a lot. But unfortunately, I'm still not 100% good at that, but I try.
That's a good one. And full disclosure, guys, he sent me this question ahead of it, and ahead of the interview.
Spoil it for him. Come on, they all think I swing this on you.
Yeah, no. Well, frankly, even though I spent a whole day thinking about it, I think the biggest personality trait for me is that I'm very confident in my area of expertise. And so sometimes to some people that can come across as kind of like asshole-ish, I just tell them look, you're full of shit. You can't do this. And it's like, okay, well, why is this kid telling me I can do this? And it's not because I think I'm that much smarter than anybody. It's just like, I know what works and I know what doesn't work because I deal with it all the time. And so I've rubbed some people the wrong way, especially business brokers. I've pissed off a lot of business brokers because they're like, they sit there, they give me their spiel, because I'm looking at buying a business, whatnot. And I say, look, they're like, I've been doing this 20 years. I've been doing this. I'm like, look, I don't give a shit. Look, let me look at the numbers. I look at the numbers. The numbers are full of shit. I tell them the numbers are full of shit, and I tell them why they're full of shit. And then I tell them, the broker, why they're full of shit. And then they don't like that. I'm like, listen, your whole thing with adjustment fatigue, you're trying to tell me this guy, how are you adjusting it from a negative 56 grand a year on his tax return to plus 700K, and you want me to pay $3 million for this thing? It's worth 500K. But they don't like to hear that because they don't make money on that. So, I'd say that's, I don't know if that's necessarily gotten me in trouble per se, but it definitely has not contributed to.
It hasn't made you very endearing to some.
It doesn't make me super endearing to some of these business brokers, but again, I don't care. A lot of them are just, a lot of them are really kind of crooks, and it's not my favorite thing.
Well, we do know some really great ones, but I agree that there's certainly some challenges out there.
This probably won't surprise you. It's overthinking. I remember, and I can't remember now if it was before or after graduate school, but I remember being at a table, and the guy next to me was trying to sell me something. I can't remember what it was, and he was asking me a question. But what he said, Gerald, you're the kind of guy that doesn't want to leave his house to head downtown without first knowing that all the lights are going to be green. Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Exactly.
Right. But take it to the extreme, it gets into overthinking, overanalyzing, and procrastination, and not moving. And what I have learned, and what I have to continue to learn, is you actually can and only steer a moving car. So to get moving, to take action, to take massive action, and then to learn and adjust your path. So
that's funny, Tom, because I was actually joking with one of my partners about that today. So we like to have a little fun. We take what we do very seriously at Armanino, but we never take ourselves seriously, right? And so we give each other a nickname at the firm, and I just recently found out that my nickname, or one of the nicknames I guess I go by here, is Jeffrey Poppins, because I have this tendency to be always eternally positive. And so, that can sometimes come to bite us in the rear, right? When we're always thinking positively, but we don't have that kind of angel on our shoulders telling us, hey, what about this? What about that? And that manifests itself actually. So we're now in March of 2021 as we're recording this podcast. And I've been saying since March of 2020 that no, COVID's not going to last that long. We'll be back in the office in a week or two. And I've continued to double down on that, Tom, because I've just figured eventually I'll be right. Right. But having people come around me that can help me see a different perspective, not saying I want to surround myself with negative people. It's not what I mean, but just surrounding people that can help me see a different or unique perspective, I think has been critical to making sure that doesn't get the better of me.
And gosh, I was wondering where you're going with this. Okay. Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, I think probably a lot of people can relate to this, would be I'm a people person. I love being around other people. And when I'm working with business owners, I really enjoy getting out. What I've historically done is you go out and you see the business owner at their business, what they do, what they've built, what they've created, and work with them in person, learn about what their desires, dreams, objectives are personally, financially, and for their business, for their employees. And over the last year, not being able to see, because of COVID, not being able to see people in person and having to do all these transactions and meetings remotely, we're all making it work. But I feel like that personality trait is it's been uncomfortable for me. Really wanting to be with people in person. I look forward to being able to do that again really soon.
I would say probably my perseverance, because I'm passionate about things. And once I get passionate about something, I will, be like a dog on a bone with it and not let go of it. So if anything, that's probably gotten me in trouble of, instead of stepping back and, maybe being a little more rational about things. So I think that the passion and perseverance is probably the things that got me in trouble most.
Probably blunt honesty. And I'll tell you a story where it kind of illustrates it. I was interviewing for a job about 30 years ago, and they asked me a similar question. They said, well, what's your biggest weakness? And I told them it was honesty. And they said, well, we don't really consider that a weakness. And I said, well, I don't really give a crap what you think. So.
Oh, that's a great question. And I know if my wife was here, she would help me answer it.
If I ask my wife, I'm going to get a list. So I just want one thing.
We'll get a top 10 list from her. But I would say the fact that I am just too blunt and too direct on things. I have no filter. And that might be caused by the fact that my family is all back from New York City originally. I'm the only Texan in my family. So I joke around that I was raised by a bunch of New Yorkers in Texas. So that may contribute to me being a little rough, but I'm always honest to a fault. And that hurts me in some cases, because I'll tell someone their baby's ugly. Not in a business sense usually, but you know what I mean. I'm just way too honest and direct.
I think this is only the second time we've had a repeat guest. So I've got a little trepidation about asking my last question. I'll ask it, and then I'm going to give a twist. So what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble over the years? Or you can tell us what personality trait has given you the most joy throughout the years.
Oh, that's really interesting. I kind of like that second one, since I've answered the first one. I think my ability to connect has given me the most joy, because not only have I been able to teach others to do that more effectively, I just find that I can be with a total stranger and stuff comes out of their mouth that they often, I hear them say, I can't believe I'm even sharing this with you. So I'm doing something that's allowing people to feel safe, which is really what we're about, creating those safe spaces. Because if you create the safety, you build connection. If you build connection, you build trust. If you build trust, you solve problems. And that's what it's all about.
Let's see. I would have to say my lack of patience.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's really, I think, what it is. You know, I'm, you know me, Tom, like I want to get things done. I want to move. And sometimes you just have to be a little bit of patience, right? Take a little bit of time, be a little bit patient. And, you know, I look back at some of the mistakes that I've made. Most of them were related to, I moved a little too quickly, right? Because I wasn't patient enough to let something evolve, right? Or I didn't give myself enough time to let it evolve.
Well, I think it's one that you're aware of. I am very detail oriented, and it helps me in my day-to-day dealings with clients and money for sure. But from a business owner's standpoint, it's probably held me back in terms of scaling up and getting the growth that I could get out of the firm. And it's an issue that I'm aware of that I can take steps to fix. One of my ideas is to get a junior Jeff inside the firm that will take equally good care of my clients so that I can be more strategic in thinking about the business.
You know, it's about being courageous. So sometimes being courageous means that I want to dive into the depths of these kinds of things. I want to understand what's going on under the surface. For many people, that can feel really too deep. And so sometimes being courageous to ask those questions can sometimes be disruptive in relationships.
Being impatient.
You impatient?
Yes. And here's a quick example.
I know you. This is why I'm laughing.
So we run our business a certain way. And when we say we're going to do something, we do it. And when others don't, it has gotten me into a little trouble because that's maybe the one time where I can get angry, and I haven't always handled that so well.
Well, that's an easy question. I know that one. You live this life for long enough, and you know how to get yourself in trouble. Oh, yeah. So on a disc profile, I'm a DI. Okay. And so kind of what that means is that I go quick. I go very confident and very fast. And that can get me in trouble because I'll just be going, and then I look behind me and nobody's there. They're all like, whoa, wait a second. Where are we headed? So I know I have to slow down, and I have to build, I have to communicate and make sure everybody's with me. And when I don't, I can get in trouble.
Probably no fear, and so I'll do stupid things if I'm challenged, especially as you're growing up and in college, and I can't tell some of those stories. So, but then also in business, I jumped out of a corporate pretty cush position and said, I'm just going to go do this, and I think I've achieved success. But if I was afraid, I think I'd second guess myself all the way. So
I take everything so personal. I am 100% a complete drama queen over stuff. At times I just have a really bad attitude. Like one of the things I know I love about business is really hating my competitors and wanting to like smash them into the dirt. And so that has gotten me in more trouble than I care to admit. Yeah.
See, I need to answer this carefully.
Did I ask Doris?
No, don't do that. This is going to sound very self-serving, I think, but I am a person that I always, I don't know if generous is the word, but I always want to make sure the other person makes out in a transaction, that they make out better than I do, if you will. And it really is a terrible way to say that, but I've always found that in whether it's engaging with competition or engaging with a client, I always try to find out how they're paid, how they make money, how they are compensated. And then let's do this transaction so that it's the best result for them. And normally that the reason I do that, I like to feel like I'm doing the right thing. But the other thing is that's not the last transaction I do with them. I do a series of transactions. So in 27 years of business, we had clients that we'd had over 20 years. So that because we constantly always made sure that it was the best decision for them. So I don't know if that's a personality trait, but it's just kind of the way that I like to do business.
A lot of them. Don't ask Mike.
Okay, now wait a minute.
On my behalf, right?
You know what I should do is ask each of you for the other.
No, don't.
We're not gonna.
Okay, if you wanted to create maybe some tension and argument, yes, do that. But otherwise, I'm not going there. I would say probably being pretty direct. I am incredibly authentic. I am who I am, the same all the time. And so, that includes, I'm not afraid to speak up. I definitely will, be direct in a conversation. And sometimes it comes across, as hopefully not too harsh. I think I've tried to get better at it over the years, but so people either really love that about me, or maybe, maybe it rubs them the wrong way. But so that's what I would say. I'm pretty direct.
I'm going to go a little vulnerable here. Mine is the personality trait that has got me into the most trouble is self-doubt. And I think we all have it. I think we all live this imposter syndrome, but specifically for me, it was self-doubt and living in this imposter syndrome. When you get around incredibly successful people, you want to behave like them. You want to act like them. You want to emulate them. And that's great. But if you do it within your business, that's one thing. But if you do it at a self-sabotaging kind of way, and I think self-doubt for many, many, many years, and it still creeps in today. I don't know if it'll ever go away. I just learned to manage it. The self-doubt slowed down my success for years. And we could have a conversation. Success breeds confidence, or confidence breeds success. But for me, success breeds confidence. And because self-doubt slowed down my success, it therefore slowed down my self-confidence. And I know that great leaders have great self-confidence, and not egotistical or selfish or overconfident, but confident in a way where you can have peace with yourself. And when you have peace with yourself and you feel joy, that is a whole nother level of leadership. It's a whole nother level of performance and success that isn't tied to monetary, but it's tied to success being at peace. And I think the people in your circles that are at peace, and they have probably very little self-doubt, or they've learned to manage self-doubt. And it took me way too many years listening to way too many people, living my life for other people and not myself, and giving in and feeding the self-doubt. And that in turn got me into the most trouble from a personal internal struggle perspective that nobody else ever saw, which always put me at conflict with myself and not at peace.
One of the benefits, Tom, of getting older is I don't give a shit sometimes, and I just tell people how I see it. Now, has that gotten me in trouble sometimes? Sure, but you know what? I still don't give a shit. So there you go.
That's awesome.
I hope that's not offensive, but that's the truth.
I thought you were actually going to say my personality trait that got me in my most trouble was my rugged good looks, but I guess not. I think this answer might be different from the last one that I gave, because I think since we talked, John Lewis, the longtime congressman, fighter for rights in America, I love hearing him talking about good trouble. Like, I got into good trouble. And I think that's a great line in terms of, while technically it was illegal to do what he did, the protesting and the marching and stuff like that, it was good trouble because it benefited folks. So I'd say, like, looking through the lens of what good trouble has a personality trait, I think it's a combination of being inquisitive and then I'm not immediately agreeable, right? If people tell me something and I don't immediately say, oh, sure, I bet it's going to be that way, right? I think this idea is going to work great. I don't automatically go, well, sure, I'm sure it will, right? Like, I start asking all sorts of questions and being skeptical. I think it draws in part because of my experience, when I was self-employed, I just thought it was a great idea and started marching down that path. I wish somebody had asked me a lot of harder questions back then. And so, but the thing is, once somebody gives me the data, like, I'm all for it. I'm not going to be, some obstructionist by any means, but I need to get that data. I'm not immediately agreeable. And I can say this is also, I talked about my cancer struggle. And so, people knew I had cancer. And then there was a time between when I announced I am going to go get surgery in a few weeks, and that time. And so people bumping into me. I still remember being at a wedding, and people are out there dancing. I'm sitting down. That's probably wise for me not to be out there dancing. And somebody came over and said, "I heard what you're going through. I know it's going to be okay." And my reaction to them was, of course I said, "Thank you. I appreciate that." But I wanted to say, what do you know? Like, how do you know? It's not necessarily going to be okay. Like, don't give me this, everything's going to work out, because it might not. And this is where I get to as a business coach is, do the things that are going to get the best outcome. Don't automatically say, because I'm crossing my fingers or I'm going to give it the old college try, it's going to work out. You have to earn that success. And so go back to my health struggles. I earned that because I didn't just take the first surgeon who was going to perform surgery on me. I sought out to see, could I get into the Cleveland Clinic? And sure enough, I did. And I went to a world-renowned doctor there, and had a world-renowned oncologist as well. And I did those hard, terrible, crummy things. They told me chemotherapy was optional. And I was like, well, I'd rather overcorrect than undercorrect. And so I went through those, 9 months of, I think it was 9 months. It's hard to remember back then. But again, this is probably a way longer and more detailed answer than what you're talking about. But because I have that in my mind that success isn't guaranteed, you got to put in the work. And it's not just working hard, it's the working smart and doing the critical thinking of it. That will sometimes get me into trouble, because someone will come to me looking for affirmation, and I will not instantly give them affirmation just to make them feel good. I think that does a disservice. Do you think I can cross this busy street? Sure. It should be like, no, why don't we look both ways, and why don't we go in a crosswalk and wait till the light changes? So I'm not sure if that answers your question there, and you're probably annoyed with me maybe giving such long, detailed answers to this. But to me, there's a depth to that thing. And so I have to pause and explain to people why I'm not jumping on board right away. I don't want them to be discouraged by it, but at the same point, I want them to be realistic, because that's what I'm going to be. That's going to be my guidepost.
I can't wait to hear this, because I can't think of anything for you.
Okay. Well, then see, you know me. So, it's gotten me in the most trouble. To me, that means, some rules are broken, and I'm pretty much a rule follower. But I think one trait that has not served me well is that although I can be, quite skeptical, one thing that has been challenging to me over the years is that somebody's on my team and they say something, I tend to believe it to be the truth, and that we're all have the same goal, paddling in the same direction. And then, some of the people are not really paddling on time. They're may not even be in the same boat, It's that, I think a number of people said it, Ronald Reagan did, as well, is that, trust but verify. Yeah.
Trust and verify.
Trust and verify. So that's been challenging to me from a personal, interaction with my colleagues standpoint. Like, seriously, you can look at my face and tell me this, but most of my team was with me for many years, decades. So it wasn't the overriding thing. I had great folks, but.
And I was hoping you'd come up with a new one, because I have a laundry list. How much time do you have?
I'll just put my headphones down, walk away, hit the restroom, grab some lunch, come back.
Yeah, I was suspecting that you might ask me that question, because I've put you on the spot a couple of times with the very same question, and I didn't realize how hard it is to answer. But I think if I had to pick one thing, it's that something my mom said to me when I was in junior high school. She says, you see things that others don't. you have the ability, you see a tiny little change in something and you register that, and it leads you down a path toward a conclusion, right? It was why she said, I could never surprise you. Because if I was trying to surprise you, that meant I was doing something different and you would notice that and pick up on it instantly. So I think the thing that's gotten me into the most trouble is knowing that is one of my superpowers. The first change I see, it changes the outcome, right? And I see the path all the way down. I'm not always right, but I am always stubborn. So I might predict something or get real stubborn because I've seen something that I think that is changing the outcome, and get very direct and stubborn about it. And it causes me to be, I'm not a good stubborn person. I'm argumentative. I want people to see it my way. And sometimes that makes me close off. Then, and ironically, having that superpower and then coupling that with the stubbornness shuts off my intuition to see other changes, right? And so I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, it's I dig in my heels too much because I do see things that other people don't see, and I just get very stubborn about it, and it causes me to go down sometimes some argumentative paths where I've had to go back and I have had to learn how to apologize. It's like the bile rising in my throat, right? I was wrong.
Oh, goodness. That is an interesting question.
Don't say math.
No, that's not personality related, right? Well, I would say I'm a pretty direct, straight shooter. And over the years, as I was developing my skills as a manager, not only of team members, but also of my client relationships, I've learned that tailoring my message to my audience and seeking to understand them first has helped me get out of situations that would have gotten me in trouble if I came across as too candid up front. Even though I'm thinking those thoughts internally, it's, the what is it? The 7 habits of effective people. My favorite one is seek to understand, then be understood.
I'm now challenged to be transparent and authentic. Honestly, it's being a little too detail oriented, a little too perfectionistic at times. One of the things that clients and organizations see when they work with us is, oh my gosh, the level of detail is overwhelming, and it almost is suffocating sometimes. Well, we're in the details, and sometimes I'm guilty of making it a little too complex. Especially at the level of, your audience, probably, we want to know the strategy. We want to know the high level process map. We don't need that level of detail. But I love this stuff. I'm in the weeds because I'm an innovator. I've been, focused on, everything that can be done at a very detailed level to improve, our clients' ability to attract people. And I'm doing what I am passionate about. So,
as my dad would say, I talk more than I listen. So I really have to work hard at listening and not talking, holding back. But, your words will get you in trouble.
Well, I'm not sure it's a personality trait that's got me in more trouble, but it's one which has probably cost me more money over the years than anything else. And that's the failure to remember that perfect is the enemy of good, which is Voltaire, and that done is better than perfect, which is Sheryl Sandberg. So those are things that I remind myself almost daily of today, and it's changing the way that I look at things. I wish I would have begun to do that.
I'm generally very outspoken, so I just can't hold back when I have an opinion. I just have to say it. I mean, it's just like the truth has to be told. So I would probably say that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But I will also say that I think that it is. It's also created a lot of opportunity, I think, for me, because I think people want to hear. Sometimes people need to hear things even though they don't want to hear them.
For me, it's balancing work and family time. I tend to work too much, and even when I'm at home, I'm usually here writing some books or, doing something. But I'm just one of these people that I'm just a restless soul, I guess. And I like to be creating and building things. And so I've done what I've done to help that is I don't ever take vacations locally. I always take a vacation, so I have to leave. And so what that does is it allows me to really focus on my wife or my family, my granddaughters. And so that I'm not near my businesses. I'm not thinking about them. So that's helped me a lot to actually just leave. And so, cause I've in the past, I've taken time off and hang out at home or whatever. And it's like, I'm just completely inundated. I'm on my computer, my phone, and it's like, that's just not working.
I go back to my 6th grade report card. Mr. Lamb wrote, you can't write this anymore on a report card, but he wrote, "Stubborn as the day is long," on my report card. And I think that's pretty true. I think it's a strength. And I also think it has gotten me in trouble. When I decide I'm doing something, I am doing it like a bulldog. I am just on it. That is it. End of story. So I think it's, again, served me well, but in some cases, I think driven people crazy.
Talking. So I have a little PTSD from my 1st grade teacher, Mrs. Lawson, who did have a beehive hairdo and used to keep pencils in the back of her beehive hairdo above her bows. She had color coordinated bows and pencils. And she just used to always tell me kind of like, keep my voice down. And I was the one with the comments on the report card that says, Judy always wants to raise her hand, always wants to answer the questions, always is talking with her neighbors.
My curiosity got me in trouble early on because I kept digging into things that I was told weren't in my purview early in my career. And when you start in big firms, I started at Deloitte years ago. You have a limited amount of time to get that audit complete, and don't go down that path. You don't have time to do it. So I used to get my hands slapped, but I also attribute that to my success.
So how many times did you hear yourself in those answers? I can tell you that I share at least 15 of those qualities that have gotten me into trouble through the years with our guests. And now that we're finishing the 100th episode, I want to take a minute to thank a few people. First, to my sidekick, Kim Benson. There's just no other way to describe our working relationship over the last 9 years. From a business perspective, she completes me. I also want to thank our past marketing intern, Kelsey Bronson, who produced over 50 episodes, and Connor Kenny, our newest team member, who picked up where Kelsey left off. I am so honored to have such an amazing team. Finally, I have to thank my beautiful bride of 31 years, Karen Bronson, who is my greatest encourager and pushes me every day to get better. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast so you'll never miss another episode. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you that it's okay to be a little vulnerable while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I'm wouldn't make any changes on that.